Hello, my name is Superintendent Ryan Lager. I wanted to take a few minutes to share a video overview with you. We've had the opportunity to provide a number of phone messages and emails, but I thought we would take some time to share a video and go through some of the plans we have as we look at reopening here in the fall. I'm going to start by going over a timeline of just some events since the start of July. Through May and June, as a leadership team here in the district, we began working on a framework, and that framework we took forward, and the first part of that is we did a survey of our parents because we wanted to know, we knew that distance learning was going to be an option parents could choose, so we wanted to know how many parents were interested in distance learning. Out of that first survey, we had about 13% of our parents who wanted distance learning, about 86% of our parents who wanted in-person learning. We took that framework and some of that information and we held some small group staff meetings on July 9th where we allowed them an opportunity to weigh in on our framework, which included a distance learning environment, it included a hybrid learning environment, and included a face-to-face learning environment. Then we took the framework, we shared that information out on July 22nd as the first of 3 drafts that we are going to release to the community. So the community could get a general overview, maybe a 20 or 30,000 foot level of where we were in the planning process as we looked at reopening for the fall. During the 20th to the 25th, we also invited staff members from all of our buildings to join the principals and have a conversation just to check in as to where our staff were, on their level of comfort, some things that they wanted to make sure we had in place so we could ensure a safe and healthy environment for our students. Then we all anxiously awaited the governor's announcement. We thought it was going to be on July 27th. It ended up being on July 30th. And there we finally had some guidance as to what the fall reopening would look like, but also what the 2020-2021 school year would look like. In that, one thing we knew we needed to do was solidify the students who were going to be in distance learning. So we submitted a survey, which I sent a phone message out as well. And in that survey, what we wanted to confirm was parents who wanted their kids full-time in distance learning, so we could remove those students from the face-to-face classrooms and begin planning for whether we would be in a hybrid model or a face-to-face model. How many kids would we still have physically on site to make sure that we could follow all of the Minnesota Department of Health requirements. On the 6th, we had a follow-up meeting with small groups of staff here in the district to review some of the work we had done, some of the answers to questions they had had from our meeting on the 9th, and also in preparation for August 10th, where we had an all-staff meeting. We invited all of our staff into our South Gymnasium, where we were able to share with them all of the PPE things we have in place, the learning environments, the guidelines that we're going to direct and really dictate what learning environments we were going to be in and when we would be in those environments. The next key date here for the community will be August 18th. August 18th will be the second of 3 releases of our draft plan for a fall reopening and also what the 2020-2021 school year is going to look like, because we do believe at various times throughout the year the learning environment might change, and I'll get into in a minute specifically what will guide that. Our final release for reopening will come a week before school, which is September 1st. The reason it's a week before is we know that with COVID things have been changing rapidly and they constantly are changing, so we didn't want to release too early where something may have had to change and then we had to public had to shift midstream as to what their plans were for the fall. So this is the first step to the document that the governor released on the 30th, and it's Stay Safe Minnesota. The first step requires the Minnesota Department of Health to use data from counties to determine learning models that will be in. That is required of us, and I'm going to talk about a little bit more specifically on the next slide what that looks like. Step 2, the Minnesota Department of Education will share county data with public schools and engage education and health experts to review what our learning plans look like. The third step is public schools will have an incident command team. We have a COVID-19 team that will meet every Friday at 11 o'clock to review the status of COVID in the county, the status of COVID in our district, to review to make sure we have all the PPE and sanitation things we need. It's a variety of things that this team is going to be working on all year. Step 4 We will consult with public health to determine learning model at the start of the school year and communicate that decision with the community. That's what we're working towards right now, and we'll go through in a minute what the specifics are going to be around that. And then step 5 really is we monitor situation reports both within our school system and our community and make decisions about what learning model we'll be in based on if we have an outbreak of COVID-19 either in our schools or in our community. The learning model decisions for 2020-2021, I think the biggest confusion about this is when the governor made his announcement on the 30th, he did not allow for local control. What he allowed for was decisions to be made locally based on data. So if we go back to last year, there was a number of counties that didn't even have confirmed COVID-19 cases in May, but yet their kids were in distance learning. So what they're looking at doing this year is looking at it by county. So if your county rates are high, that's going to determine what learning model you're in, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not our decision to decide whether we would be face-to-face or hybrid or distance learning. Our decision has to follow the guidelines that were released by the Minnesota Department of Health and the Commissioner of Education. And what you have here is how that is going to be calculated. So each Friday, what we have to do is we look at the county population, which is 149,013. We divide it by 10,000. Then we have to take the total number of cases in Scott County over the last 14 days and multiply those numbers together, and it's going to get us a score. Sorry, divide those numbers together, and it's going to get us a score over here. And that score will fall into one of these categories here at the top. If our score is 0 to 10, we're face-to-face, 5 days a week, all kids, school, somewhat as normal. There's still some requirements that kids would have to follow in those environments, but everybody would be coming to school. If your number is between a 10 or a 20, elementary students would be in person 5 days a week. Middle school and high school kids would be in a hybrid model, which we'll explain those later today. A score of 10 to 20, they both would be in a hybrid. A 30 to 50, elementary would be in a hybrid. Middle school and high school would be in distance. And a score of 50 or more, both would be in distance. Currently, I believe there are 3 counties in the state of Minnesota that are over 50 and would be starting in a distance learning environment. Down here at the bottom is just kind of a running total of what our numbers have been. So we were 13.18 back end of June, start of July. Right now we're hovering around a 21. So that would put us in a hybrid for both, so K-12 hybrid, but I'm going to talk about what that's going to look like at each of those levels. This is just an email that we got back from the Department of Ed because we asked a specific question, and again, going back to the idea of a local decision versus local control. And in the second sentence it says here, if schools want to implement a less restrictive model than what is recommended, for instance, if your district wanted to be in person when the recommendation was to implement the hybrid model based on the data, you would need to have consultation with MDH, Minnesota Department of Health, who would have the authority, along with the commissioner, to approve or deny that request. So this is just validation or verification that if we wanted to go 5 days a week face-to-face with a score of almost 21 on the calculation that they gave us, we would have to have approval from the commissioner of MDH and the Minnesota Department of Education. Okay, so looking at learning models and some of the requirements that are going to be a part of these. On the left-hand side, my left, you're right here probably. If we are in a face-to-face or learning environment, every student is required to wear a mask during the school day. Obviously, during lunch, they'll be able to take their mask off and eat and do those things. We'll have some unique components to what lunch is going to look like, how we socially distance and those things as well. We have PPE for direct support staff. Our staff will have masks and they'll also have face shields. All of our kids will sanitize in, sanitize out of all of our classrooms. We will spray down the desks at the end of every class period and wipe them down. So we have some pretty stringent components in that follows the cleaning requirements. We have a building level COVID coordinator that's a part of that COVID team I talked about earlier. And we will not be allowing visitors unless there is a a valid or reliable reason why we need people in the buildings. They will not be allowed in the buildings like we have in the past. We're not going to have large gatherings. For those of you that are following, they have moved the football and volleyball seasons to the spring, so we won't have large activities in our facilities. And then we have to monitor kids for illness and sickness, and this is probably one of the most important things that we're going to rely on or really need help from parents. If students are running a fever or not feeling well, we really need you to keep them home for the day. I know in the past it's been, try to see, can you make it through a half a day? Maybe it's just a morning thing. I woke up and I was sick to my stomach, or I maybe had a low-grade fever. You probably could get through the day. In the situation we're living in now, we really need parents to keep those kids home and monitor them just to stop this potential spread of COVID from coming into our schools. Now, in a hybrid model, if you notice the difference here, we actually we need to have a 6-foot social distancing at all times in our school buildings, 50% capacity of the building. So not 50% of what class size was, but it's 50% capacity of what the space is. Transportation, nobody can sit within 6 feet of a bus driver, and we need 50% capacity on buses. And then sufficient staffing levels to meet all of those. What I'll tell you is right now at the elementary level, we are working on 2 schedules, one which would be face-to-face, 5 days a week in a normal learning environment. Obviously, these things still need to be followed. But we're also working on a hybrid schedule at the elementary level where kids will still come 5 days a week, but will be spaced out with more staff and in a variety of different spaces in our buildings. So, what are some of the requirements going to be? All of our kids will be required to wear masks, and our staff, students and staff. Some of our staff are looking at potentially wearing face shields without masks. We're seeking clarification on whether we can do that or not, just because for some kids that lip reading piece of it is an important part of what we do. We'll have daily cleaning routines. Students and teachers will sanitize in and out of class. Desks will be cleaned after each class. If we're in a face-to-face environment, we're still going to space kids 3.5 feet apart. If we're in hybrid, they'll be spaced 6 feet apart. Limiting most classrooms to 20 or under. We're going to do the best we can and follow the requirements for social distancing in common spaces. And we want to keep seating charts the same in all of our classrooms throughout the year. In case we have an outbreak, we're still waiting for some clarification on if we have an outbreak, who has to quarantine and doesn't. But we know if we have consistent seating spaces, if it's a 6-foot radius or a 10-foot radius, the person who tested positive will know where kids were sitting in those spaces. And again, we'll be greatly limiting the visitors, and you have to have a valid or reliable reason why we would need people in. We're just really trying to reduce the amount of traffic that we have coming in and out of our classrooms. One thing we heard loud and clear last year, not only here, but I think throughout the state, is parents' desire for a more synchronized learning environment. And what synchronized learning means is students will actually go online. If you're a high school student, 7-12, you'll log into First Hour, and you'll be in the classroom virtually if you're in a digital learning environment, whether it's hybrid or have chosen distance learning. Second hour, you'll log in. Second hour, third hour, you'll log in. So they'll actually follow a daily schedule. At the elementary, right now, we're slotted to do hybrid, and we will be doing hybrid. Very similar, though. Elementary kids are going to come to school 5 days a week. We have the space in our elementary schools to space them out. We're going to use some staffing differently as well. So hybrid for elementary kids will come 5 days a week and be spaced out. One thing I want to highlight here, I think as people talk, face-to-face learning or hybrid learning when kids are present is going to be different than when you and I went to school and different than we've known for our kids. It's not going to be an environment where kids are going to be working in cooperative groups or teachers are going to be kneeling down and working with kids one-on-one. There will be distance between students and staff and between students. So even though we talk about face-to-face or hybrid, for instance, in this environment, we could have kids who have to sit, maybe are sitting in a hallway, sitting on an overflow space, which could be a gym, a commons area, and that. They may be synchronously connected to the classroom through a device because of social distancing requirements we have. And that is common with what a lot of school districts around us are doing. They're using their gym spaces, their common spaces, and they're spreading kids out. They're at least at the elementary level able to bring all the kids in so they can connect with them and work with them. but at various points they're going to need to be spaced out, and they may even be in a synchronous learning environment even though they're present. One thing here for staff was, they would struggle at times if we had a class and only 7 or 8 kids would show up. So being in a synchronous learning environment, we are going to require that kids, if they're in a distance learning environment or at the secondary in a hybrid learning environment, that they do log in and that they are present in class for the time that the teacher needs them to be there, and they will take attendance. Now we understand one of the things we're going to work through are some of the potential internet connectivity issues. If there's 3 kids or 4 kids at home at a time trying to access the same wireless device or network to get on the internet and can't do that, we may have to work with families or come up with creative solutions. But it's one of those situations where we're going to have to learn these things as we go and then monitor and adjust. So hybrid 7-12, and I want to separate the two because, like I said, elementary, our plan is in hybrid, those kids will come into school 5 days a week. But hybrid 7-12 is going to look a little bit different. This is a very consistent model with what districts around the state are using. There are a number of districts that are going to be required to be in hybrid, at least at the start of the year. But this is a sample schedule or an example. We'll have more specifics coming out around this in the next few weeks. The Group A kids would come in this model on, say, Monday and Tuesday. And then they would be at home working in a synchronized learning environment on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The Group B kids would be face-to-face on Wednesday, Thursday, but they would be synchronously learning in their classroom from home through a virtual learning environment on Monday and Tuesday. Then in this model, the C, which would be the Friday, is an asynchronous, synchronous learning day. We also would potentially bring kids in, maybe kids who are in distance learning who are falling behind, kids who in the hybrid model are struggling or falling behind, some of our special education students who need additional assistance. But our teachers will be connecting with various kids. One of the big things coming out of last spring is we really want to increase that teacher-student connection, especially with those learners who are struggling. Teachers will also have activities or lessons that kids who are progressing fine through the standards are doing that they will be doing on this C day. What we haven't landed on is what day is going to be C. What we're working on is trying to minimize the number of days we have off, so when kids they can be face-to-face as many days as possible throughout the year, and also what works best in terms of attendance and that for kids. The C day could be on a Wednesday, could be on a Friday, could be on a Monday, but it'll be on one of those 3 days, but we're still working through the logistics. Like I said, there'll be more information about it, but most likely this is the hybrid model based on our current number that our 7-12 students will start in. The only thing we have to iron out is which days are going to be which. So K6, as I said, we're on the cusp, right, or on the number where at 19, anything in the 19s, we can be face-to-face. What we will do is we're going to stay in the hybrid model. Kids will come to school 5 days a week. We'll have more teachers spread out, less specials and specialty opportunities for kids. And then we'll be using more space. We'll be using the music rooms, the gym, the commons area as actual instructional spaces for traditional classroom type education. We will maintain 6-foot distancing, and all elementary kids will come to school 5 days a week. One of the things with this is, though, we'll continue to monitor. 3-4 weeks, if we're under 20 or we're down at 16, we may shift all kids back to what would have been their face-to-face schedule, put all of our elected teachers that we're helping support general classrooms back to elective programming, and move all kids back into the spaces they were, and then continue in the face-to-face environment, still following the requirements of wearing a mask, PPE, sanitizing in and out. Those pieces will always be there, and we want to have a few weeks of that, but I think the important thing to note is in either of these models, our plan is to bring our elementary kids in 5 days a week. We've talked a lot about overflow spaces. This, again, just talks about that to maintain social distancing in hybrid, kids may have to be synchronously learning in different spaces than the classroom they typically would be sitting in. Transportation. A couple things here. Students will need to wear a mask. Drivers will wear a mask. Students won't be allowed to sit within 6 feet of the driver. And then it's only 50% capacity on our buses. So kids can sit in, they'll be divided throughout the bus. It'll only be 50% capacity, and they have to be, like I said, 6 feet behind the driver. And our buses will be cleaned between morning and afternoon routes, so everything will be sanitized and cleaned as always. So I just want to thank all of you for taking a few minutes here to review this video. We wanted to try a different medium to be able to reach our public. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me, email me. Like I said, there'll be more information. The 18th, we're going to release our second draft plan. And then we'll continue to have more information that will come out based on what our scores and how they change over the next few weeks as to what model we will be starting in at September 8th when students come back. Right now, as it stands, we will be hybrid K-12, but all K-6 students will be coming in 5 days a week in that hybrid model. We'll have specifics on what days the 7-12 kids would be coming in and what that hybrid model will look like in the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much.